Hi, I'm Paul Germain, and welcome to another session of Smart Boating. As you know, if you watched the show before, we covered a wide variety of topics from hurricane protection to man overboard. And the idea is to provide you with some information that will help you make smarter decisions and have more fun on the water. And today's show is right up that alley as we're going to look at getting started in power boating. And joining us is local boater, Tom Arntzen. Welcome, Tom.
Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Hey, Tom, you know, we got a really cool show. I think people are going to really learn from it. But before we get into it, can you share a little bit about your background?
Sure. I started boating in my teens, and then I had a classic old wooden sloop for about a decade or so after that. Mm-hmm. So while my experience is a little more in sailing, I think at this point in my life, my family and I felt that a mid-sized powerboat might better fit our needs.
Okay. All right. Well, that's just the right experience we need for this show today, so why don't we get right into it?
Sounds great.
Okay. Well, Tom, you know, for a wide variety of reasons, people have been kind of flocking to boating recently. There's been a lot of, whether it's the economy or the pandemic, or a lot of things that come together, almost a perfect storm, and they've stimulated this interest in people to go boating. And that's great, because boating's a fun sport, and I think a lot of people enjoy it. However, there are some pitfalls to getting involved in boating that I think if people are aware of them, it's going to help their experience. And the first one that comes to mind for me is talking with the significant other and or the family about whether they really want to go boating in contrast to golfing or hiking or biking. Did you guys have that conversation in your family?
Well, it's an interesting point. We did actually over many, many years. As we've been on the mooring wait list for over 15 years now, we've been looking forward to the time when we could actually get a boat. So we discussed it over the years, and the family's always been quite keen on it.
Oh, okay. All right. So it was a solid, everyone was behind it type situation for you. All right. So you see this boating's going to be fun. We're all going to get into it. And then there's some choices to be made on the front end. One is the size of the boat, and another one is the type of hull. You know, whether you have a very deep hull or something that's a little more modified. What did you guys think about in terms of the size of the boat and the type of hull that you wanted underneath it?
Well, we were thinking perhaps a 20 to 22 foot, either a walk-through or a small cuddy cabin.
Yeah. With
a walk-around, easy access. We wanted something with a deep hull so we could take it out in the ocean, make sure it was comfortable.
Yeah, yeah.
And in terms of the layout, one thing that I wanted was a nice roof.
Okay.
A big T-top or hardtop, as they call it, to protect us from the sun.
Okay, so up to 22 feet, enough seating for a lot of family members and some protection from the sun.
Yep, five kids coming and going, and my wife and I, we all like to get out on it, so.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yep.
You know, Tom, there's a lot of sources to find a boat, if you're interested. There's a lot of sources out there. I've got a couple here with me. One's a big, well-known website called Yacht World, international in scope. It tends to be a little larger boat, probably 30, 40 feet, but quite a portfolio of boats to look at and choose from. There's a related website. They're actually owned by the same company, Yacht World and Boat Trader. Similar format, big search engine, a lot of boats, more national in scope, but a smaller boat and more of the size that you're thinking of. So a lot of people use that. Yacht World for maybe the larger boat, Boat Trader for a boat the size you're looking for. Some other sources that are worth checking in, I think, would be Craigslist. You got a local Craigslist Boston. Now you have Facebook Marketplace, and they tend to have smaller boats and boats that are less expensive than the two big websites. But quite a variety of boats on them, quite a number of listings. And then, of course, there's marinas and dealers that carry various types of boats. They have some in stock, or they know of some coming up. And then you've got friends asking around, anyone wants to sell a boat. So those are some of the ways you can go looking for a boat. And the general idea is to find something or come up with some options that makes some sense to go look at. How did you guys approach the process of just trying to find some things to look at?
Well, first of all, we decided to go after a used boat, in our case, to ease back into the boating world, so to speak.
Yeah.
And at first, most of the searches were online, whether it was Craigslist in Boston or the local Facebook marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty difficult right now because there's not many powerboats for sale on the used market.
Right.
You know, since the pandemic started, a lot of folks just wanted to get away, get their family and friends out on the water.
Yep.
And that sort of fueled the market to the point where prices were inflated and just not that many available.
Yeah, right.
But we looked around, had a few fits and starts. We talked to people after we found one and debated it back and forth. And, you know, it's hard to walk away, but you know there's going to be something better.
Yeah.
In the end, I started going to a lot of the yacht yards and the marinas, talking to people, asking questions, seeing if they had used boats, and it was sort of an educational process.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot through that, and it takes some time. But maybe after about 6 boats, there was one that started looking pretty good, and that's when.
How did you find out about that one?
Actually, word of mouth through a marina and a friend. So.
Okay. Yeah. So there's big technological websites, but in the end, it was just a friend of a friend. Yeah.
That was it.
Okay. So you're narrowing it down, looking at some prospects, and most people use the telephone. They call ahead, so you learn more about what's going on with the boat. And I know when I would do that more actively, I'd be looking to pick up on things like I'd be looking for sincerity and integrity. Could I trust this person? I'd be looking for integrity, which kind of goes along those same lines. I'd be looking for how the boat was used. Did the kids thrash it 24/7, or would they just go fishing every now and then? And oftentimes I'd be curious about the owner's professional background, because my experience has been, as weird as it may sound, is that a lot of professional engineers, particularly mechanical engineers, they keep pretty good shape of their outboards. So it's kind of a good thing if you can get one. When you were calling around with your wife, were there any things that you kind of dialed in on in terms of what you thought was important prior to going to see the boat?
Well, I think I probably searched as best I could online first, and then through initial phone conversation. And if it sounded interesting after discussing the boat with the owners, I would go for an initial visit.
Okay.
And the initial visit was really just to get the feel for the boat, the owners, and at that point I would go home and sort of digest it.
I see.
And I would end up with more questions and, judge whether it's worth a second visit or not.
All right. So it was an iterative process, really. Yeah.
It was, and usually on the second visit I would take a friend or my wife just to get another opinion.
Yeah, I want to get into that in a second, but basically find something, do a little light due diligence, and then go to the next level, right?
This is all part of the initial, education process.
Right. Tom, it's important to do due diligence on a boat like anything else. And what I oftentimes do is I'll take a clipboard like this, and it has a checklist on it, so when I get there I remember the important things I want to go over. And oftentimes I'll invite a family member or a friend, because what happens typically is the seller bends the ear of the purchaser. You can't focus, you're distracted. And to have somebody else there that's objective, it can be that second set of eyes and opinion. I think that's really, I found it helpful to me. How do you approach the process?
Well, I think the first visit I probably just had a mental checklist of what I wanted to check the first time seeing the boat.
Mm-hmm.
Then I go home and digest it a bit, and I'd start thinking about it, and you develop questions as you mull it over.
Right.
So the second visit, and you say, it's good to bring a friend and for another opinion. For that visit, I usually have an actual list of specific items that I wanted to check on this specific boat.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it prevents you from missing something that you feel is important.
Yeah, it's easy to overlook. When I go for a physical visit, typically, ideally the boat's on a trailer, and I look at the hull, the bottom, which is tough to see because it's usually painted with bottom paint, so that can conceal some damage. But I look in the hull and the top sides, I'm looking for gouges, I'm looking for cracks, that sort of thing, the surface itself, whether it's shiny or not. And I also look at the hardware. Is it rusting? Is it corroded? That sort of thing. That gives me a good first impression from the ground level, what I'm looking at. How about you? What were the things that you dialed in on?
Well, I was fortunate. This boat was on the trailer in the yard, and you had a good view of the hull. I walked around, and I could see a few marks here and there, but nothing significant.
Mm-hmm.
And in general, the trim looked pretty good. There was, some minimum tarnishing and things like that, but nothing significant.
Right. So it sounds like you follow a similar approach. Yep. Well, Tom, once you check out the hull, usually get up on top sides and look around. Upholstery, it's really interesting. Over the years, boats have become more and more heavily upholstered. A lot of upholstered surfaces in a boat, whether it's seats or coaming or whatever it might be. Was this an area that you paid attention to when you're looking at boats?
Yeah, there is quite a bit of upholstery, and some of the cushions are removable and they're in good shape, but I did check it over, and you look for some cracking and some aging.
Yeah.
I didn't put too much weight on that as long as it was reasonable.
Okay, you didn't spot any discoloration. Sometimes things will fade or dyes will flow through to it, that sort of thing, but overall the boats you saw look pretty good in terms of the upholstery.
Yeah. In regards to the rest of the top side, I did like the substantial nature of the hard top, and the fact that it covered the whole width of the boat.
Oh yeah,
that was very important to us. And isinglass was a nice feature. In general, it was pretty clear. The one out front is a little opaque, but not too bad.
Right. Overall, 85% of it or so was nice and clear, almost brand new, really. Yeah, that's nice to have. How about the cabin? So you look at the interior, look at the upholstered surfaces. You got a cuddy cabin in there. Are there things that, again, were on your mental checklist? This is what I want to make sure is okay in here.
Yeah, a few things. You want to make sure that if you do want to spend the night, the berths are big enough for an adult, and the upholstery and everything is relatively clean. You sense any kind of mold or smell like that. I like the fact that there were side windows.
Yes.
There was a roof vent, so you can get a lot of fresh air in there. So overall, it was pretty good.
All right, you didn't see any signs of leaking from the portholes or from the hatch or anything like that onto the upholstery, so that was another positive check mark for this boat.
Yeah, it looked okay.
Yeah. Tom, boats are surprisingly complex systems. They have a lot of different components, whether it's gas-related, electrical-related, that sort of thing. You've got batteries, you've got switches, you've got lights, you've got bilge pumps. This stuff's pretty important, particularly the bilge pump and the batteries. Now, the fellow that you looked at, and maybe some other boats, demonstrated some of the electrical switches and stuff for you, right? And you've got a panel of them here.
Yes, right here. A bunch of switches. Like this one is for the bilge pump right here. The lights, various functions on the boat.
Right. So he walked you through and demonstrated that they were still working. And did he demonstrate that the bilge pump was working and the batteries were, operable?
Yeah, certainly if the bilge pump isn't good, you can have a serious problem with the boat.
Right.
What also makes it more complicated is that they're in hard to reach, hard to access places. So we carefully pulled up some of the covers and inspected where all the functions were.
Right.
And that was very beneficial. I took a lot of notes.
Right. You really need a flashlight, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you need a few things because it's a very dark area down there. But it's important, right? Because a lot of boats, their owners will buy pieces from a big box store like a Costco or a Walmart, which is fine. But sometimes they don't follow the same marine procedures about dating them, when they're good and when they're bad. So it's important to really focus in on them and make sure you've got something to work with. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. All right. Well, let's look a little bit Coast Guard equipment. You can't go anywhere without that, or you're not supposed to, anyways. So here's the traditional life preserver. This came with the boat, right?
Yeah, we had a full complement of 4 of those, as well as one quick release throw in the water
cushion.
type of cushion. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I see you got a horn there.
Yeah, we had a horn. We also came equipped with a fire extinguisher.
Okay.
And of course an anchor up front.
Right. So that's part of your checklist when you're looking over the boat. Not only the physical condition of the boat, but these really legally required accessories to go with it, right?
Absolutely, you need all that. And you know, when things go bad on the water, if you don't have these things, it can get ugly.
It can get ugly, right? You know, of course, a small power boat, an integral part of that is the power plant, the engine, in this particular case, an outboard. And I've always felt that the more history you have on the boat and the owner, the better. What was your experience in general, looking at different boats in terms of the records they had, the history you're able to learn, and how about for this specific one?
Well, it was a mixed bag on the boats I looked at. Some had good records, others did not. As it turned out, the owner of this boat, the gentleman, was a mechanical engineer.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a very healthy mental history of all the service work he had done over the years.
Okay, in his head, he said, yeah.
He relayed that and
okay.
took his word for it. And I was able to confirm some of the work that the local marina had done for him as well.
Oh, okay.
So everything checked out there. One concern was we didn't really have an hour counter on the dashboard, so I had no idea what the engine had
how
been
many
running.
hours, yeah.
But talking to my brother-in-law, actually, suggested that with Suzuki's there's a way to engage the ignition key and check the blinks on the tack gauge, as well as the resting location of the needle.
Yes.
And it turns out the engine has very, very low hours on it for a 12-year-old boat, so that gave us a lot of confidence.
Very nice, very nice. So you had some good background, had some good history, and a way to kind of verify it a little bit. And then you ran the engine. You didn't launch it, but you used muffs, right? Yeah, how'd that work out?
Yeah, I'd never seen them before. There's like little ear muffs that go at the lower end of the engine where the water intake is, and it hooks up to a garden hose so you can run it in the backyard on the trailer.
Yeah. So
they fired it up, and it started, first time since it had been running in the fall. So that was encouraging as well.
Yeah. So ideally, if someone's checking out a boat, it's good if they are able to launch it and take it for a ride, because then they can see everything from the basic shifting to the top end. But that seemed to be a good substitute for you because you had confidence that you built through all the other referrals about the engine's history, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, once you decide on a boat that might be appropriate for you, you got to negotiate the price, and really there's not as much room in there anymore, right? Because there's such a scarcity of boats. But you were able to do that successfully with a seller, find a compromise that you were both happy with, right?
A little bit, not much, but you're right. There is pretty high prices on boats, and there's not much deliberation, I guess, going on.
No. So you agree on a price, and then I think you've got some notes about what the process is after that to make it all legal and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, there are a fair amount of logistics in getting everything titled and everything. For the boat and motor, the Massachusetts Environmental Police handle registration of the boat.
Yep.
And they have 5 offices in the state. The closest one for us is Causeway Street in Boston, across from the garden. And what you need there is you need the bill of sales, you need a proof that you have already paid the sales tax, which you can do online beforehand. You need like an etching of the hull ID number.
An etching, yeah. How do you do that?
Well, on the stern of the boat, there's some emboldened characters like a VIN of a car.
Yes.
And over time, it sort of gets hard to read, but you take a sheet of paper and a pencil and you just shade over it and it becomes quite visible. You have to present that when you go for the registration.
Need that for proof, yeah.
That's
How about
very
the trailer?
important.
Do you need anything special on the trailer to get that squared away?
Well, the trailer is handled separately by the RMV in Massachusetts because it's actually on the roadways.
Yes.
And besides the bill of sales again to pay for the sales tax on the trailer, you also need an insurance stamp to prove that it's insured when you take it on the road. So that's very important. I didn't have that the first time I went there.
That could be a surprise. So people want to do that before they go to the agency. Yeah.
Another thing about the trailer is that you don't need a title for the trailer if it's under 3,000 pounds.
Okay, all right. Now I want to revisit that point about insurance just briefly. You have the proof of insurance to go through the proper paperwork, but also, even though it's not required, or doesn't, my understanding is it's not required in the state, it's a no-brainer to get insurance, and personal liability has to be right up there. It's so easy for things to go wrong quickly in boating to have that extra layer of protection right out of the chute, just as soon as you get going. That's a smart idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. Well, there can be a lot of paperwork involved with buying a boat, especially one that has a trailer and that sort of thing, and you got to go through the different government agencies. So you may or may not have the timing of the paperwork being approved with the time when you want to either move or use the boat. So if you don't, local marinas and dealers oftentimes offer a service. We'll come pick it up, use their plate. I think you were fortunate enough to get your paperwork together in a way that enabled you to take it home. Were there things on the trailer itself? Was there like a mental or a physical checklist that you used to ascertain that this was a smart move, the trailer's in good enough shape to be roadworthy?
Certainly. You have to check. I checked with the previous owner on things like when were the tires replaced, have the axles been properly greased, the bearings and so forth.
Yeah.
And he mentioned he had done that frequently over the years.
Mm-hmm.
You want to check the basics with the winch cranking fabric, make sure that's solid.
Yeah.
And
how about lights? Lights are a big deal, right? Because you get different connectors that connect things, right?
It's always a challenge. And also the brakes, of course, on the trailer. This had a unique brake system.
Yes.
One thing that we ran into a little trouble with was the ball size on the hitch. And
all right.
Turns out that the owner happened to have one. He was pretty convinced that was the right size, but after some time out in the hot sun, we realized that we needed a smaller ball size, which I happened to have with me at that time.
Oh, that's good thinking. So the point being, if you have something at home, maybe bring it with you, and if you're making multiple trips, maybe check one of the trips to see what's on it, because it's labeled on the trailer tongue, right?
Yeah.
What the right ball is. So that avoids a surprise at the end if you've made that part of your earlier due diligence, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, once you make a purchase, you got to move it, especially if it's on a trailer. And it seems to me, if someone has an opportunity and they're not used to driving, say, a truck with a trailer, it might be a good idea if they had an opportunity to practice without any boat or steep turns or steep hills or anything like that. What was your experience?
Yeah, I think that would have been a good idea. I didn't have much experience, with the trailer, except for pulling a U-Haul off to a college with my kids, and that was a long time ago. So if I had some open space where I could have taken the trailer and backed it up a few times, just got the feel for it, it would be beneficial.
Yeah.
Another thing you have to be very careful of is the sheer width of the boat and the trailer.
Right, and anything that's coming off the trailer too, right?
Certainly. Tight turns, you got to take it wide so you don't take out any bystanders or mailboxes on the way.
Right. So it's an art to driving a trailer, and it takes a little while, so people should be careful with that. So okay, so you get the boat home safely. You didn't knock off any pedestrians or any bicyclists or anything like that. And my understanding, the boat was a little bigger. It looks a little bigger in your driveway than it did at the other person's driveway. So you should, make a mental note. How big is this boat really, right? And then you had some decisions to make, right?
Yeah, when we finally got it backed up the driveway, we realized that it was much taller than expected with the trailer, the boat, the T-top, everything like that.
Yeah.
So you have to watch out for bushes and trees, overhang, and there was only really one spot on the driveway to put it. Mm-hmm. And then the question became whether or not to launch it in the next day or two or do some service on it. And I had pretty high confidence things were good. Having talked to the previous owners, they were pretty much ready to launch it themselves had they not sold it. But we ended up launching it, and on second thought, I probably would have taken an extra day or two and maybe replaced the batteries or something like that.
Right,
Yeah.
just for that extra layer of security.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, Tom, it's hard to believe, but time to wrap up the show today. And we've really covered a lot of ground, from deciding if you want a boat, what type of boat, how to find one, some of the things to look for, what to do when you get it home. Is there anything you'd like to add to the show before we wrap it up?
Well, I didn't have much experience buying and looking for a used powerboat.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a while since I actually operated a boat.
Right.
So I've learned an awful lot through this process, through some fits and starts, but it's been very beneficial, and I hope everyone will be able to take some good tips
Yeah,
from our little video today.
absolutely.
And we're certainly, the whole family's enjoying the boat now. And
Excellent. Well, that's just the way it should be. That's the outcome you want, right?
that's right.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you, and thank you, Smart Boating viewers. If you have comments or questions or just want to see another show, go to smartboatingus.com. Thank you.